Hey, welcome into the Blogger Bowl, everybody, to our fifth and final Power 5 conference preview. As always, Dan, let's see the home field apparel shirt. It's a North Carolina shirt. Phil's got the Roy Kent jersey on. I have my Coach K funeral shirt.
I know Matt wanted to do this look for the show, but I've been taking my screenshots, and we've done the three of us side by side. So I
like that. Hey, that's fair. Hey,
do that.
You're running the dials here. You can produce this as whichever way you see fit and to get your screenshots, as long as Home Field Apparel sponsors us. That's really all I care about. And whatever you got to do to get that done, let's get it done. But like I said, fifth and final of the Power 5 conference previews. Today, the ACC. Phil and I were talking about it a little bit earlier today, and then Dan, when he popped into here before in the pre-show meeting, we were chatting about it a little bit. I think you disagree with me, but I kind of think of the conferences that we've talked about so far, maybe the Big 12 is a little bit more unpredictable, but outside of Clemson having a really good defense, I'm not sure we really know anything about a lot of these teams. Like Miami's on the way up, and I think they're on a similar trajectory to USC, where Mario Cristobal is going to recruit them at a really good level, and they're going to get pretty good, but I don't think they're quite there yet. NC State's supposed to have a pretty good team, but I feel like every year that NC State's supposed to have a pretty good team, they kind of fall flat on their face. So outside of Clemson's defense, like what do we know for sure about this conference?
Well, my point is, we were talking about it right before we started. I'm a big believer in SP plus numbers because I think Bill Connolly is really smart, and it's a way for me to look at things without personal bias. And the ACC is split into a bunch of tiers, and here's what I think we know. Like, Clemson is the best team in this league by a pretty wide margin, 6 points on a neutral. Then you have the second tier, which we'll just keep it to for now. NC State, Pittsburgh, and Miami is the next tier, and I don't think that's unreasonable. We talked a lot about Pittsburgh's offense last year with Kenny Pickett and how great and explosive that was, and Jordan Addison and all that. Their defense was actually quietly very good, a top 20 defense and EPA per play defense, and they've got a bunch of guys at least up front coming back, and NC State's got a lot of talent coming back from a team that won 9 wins or 10 wins if you count the bowl game, which they just claimed victory for, which, by the way, if you're allowed to claim national championships because some fifth party journalism organization in 1937 said you won the national championship, claim whatever you want in college football. So, yeah, I mean, there's some uncertainty, and we'll get into what we think in terms of our most interesting storylines and things like that. I mean, there's, certainly some interesting developments with Pittsburgh and with Miami. Pittsburgh losing their offensive coordinator and their quarterback, Miami bringing in Cristobal, knowing what's going to happen with some of the middle of the pack. But the ACC kind of always exists as a conference of chaos every year. The ACC wheel of suck is a thing that has existed for a long time. And there's really no reason to expect that it wouldn't happen again this year outside of Clemson at the top and Georgia Tech and Duke at the bottom.
Phil, you seem to be – we'll get to your best bet in a little bit, but you seem to maybe not even believe that we know that Clemson's the best team in this conference.
Well, it's not that. I think what we know is Clemson's defense is going to be good enough to should be able to beat almost everybody in the ACC. Because I think their defense is that good. There's no doubt about it. I think it's that good. I think there's not going to be much drop off. The new D coordinator it's a relatively unknown guy, but he's been on the staff for I think 10 plus years and hit the way through. So I don't see that being a huge drop off. I think just the question mark is what is their offense going to be? And we don't know that. But I think the one thing which is interesting, if Uiagalelei is what he was last year and pretty bad, they have a 5-star freshman quarterback who's supposed to be absolutely lights out. So I'm curious the leash that DJ is going to be, but also he could come out and be really good. The reports coming out that he's, lost a bunch of weight, refocused, and saying all the things that camps should say of someone who's supposed to have a rebound year. But again, you have no idea. And so I think the reason I'm wearing my Roy Kent jersey today is, everything in Ted Lasso is about believe. I have absolutely no idea who to believe in the ACC this year, but I think that makes it fun, right? It's going to be a fun conference, and I can get into it with my interesting storyline a little bit, but it's a conference full of pretty interesting quarterbacks and pretty fun quarterbacks to watch. That some of them have been kind of coming up through the ranks, a little bit of journeyman, and it's just going to be exciting to watch the ACC this year, and it could be something where it's chaos, which is I always root for chaos when I don't know or don't have a dog in the fight. I root for chaos.
So here's my monologue on Clemson.
Let's hear it.
this defense, while they're not going to be the Georgia 2021 defense, and I don't think anyone would suggest that they're going to be, they might have the most talented defensive line that has ever been assembled in college football. If you're going just strictly off of the recruiting rankings, they have 3 starters on the defensive line that were top 10 prospects in their recruiting classes. Not on the defensive line. We're talking nationally, like every position, top 10 players on that defensive line. Yeah, they lost Skowski, who was kind of the talisman of that defense, but I mean, he was more of a heart and hustle kind of guy than a guy who was going to make big plays athletically and that kind of thing. This defense is going to be spectacular. Their offense last year was 109th in EPA per play. If that offense even like jumps into the middle of college football, if we're talking like 50 to 60 range, this is a team that's going to be in the college football playoff. Because we talked about how bad and how inconsistent they were, and they were really just a couple of mistakes away, couple of plays here and there away from making it to the ACC championship game with an offense that was really inefficient. That said, I feel like Clemson as a program is kind of at a crossroads right now where their days of being a team that is competing for national championships might be dwindling, might be coming to an end. Again, I think they're a playoff caliber team. I think if they get there, it's not going to be like Alabama 50, Clemson 7. It's going to be like Alabama 24, Clemson 7, where Alabama just bleeds them to death because Clemson's not just going to give up the big plays. But here's the thing. I mean, you can talk all you want about how DJ Uiagalelei was inconsistent and what Cade Klubnik could bring to the table and so on and so forth. And that's certainly true. But here's the dirty little secret about this Clemson team. The 2 areas where they've been typically very good historically under Dabo, at least the years they've been winning national championships on offense, was at quarterback and wide receiver. And they don't really have the guys at wide receiver right now. They really are very unproven at that position. They've got really good running backs, but their offensive line's kind of iffy. Through everything, through his uptick in recruiting that he did in the early part of the 2010s, Clemson's never really developed and recruited these just awesome SEC, what you would normally see at like an Alabama or a Georgia or even at like Oklahoma, those offensive lines that are just going to maul people and beat people up front. It's been quarterback, it's been skill position players, and it's been defensive lines that are great. They've got running backs. They've got an incredible defensive line. They've got talent at quarterback. Like if DJ can be similar to what he was in the very brief glimpses they saw in 2020 instead of what they saw in 2021, they're going to probably, I mean, if he's that good, they're going to go undefeated this season. I don't think he's going to be that good, but I think their ceiling, they could still potentially do it because as much as I like some of the other teams in this league, there's still a pretty wide talent gap between Clemson and everybody else.
Do you think there's going to be any sort of narratives around, or not even narratives, but I guess, Dan, what's your opinion on, Dabo leading the helm with new offensive and defensive coordinators? Do you think that's going to have much of an impact?
So this was another thing, and I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot the other point I wanted to make, which was Clemson really, really had a chance. Part of them being at this crossroads was they had a chance to reinvigorate what they do on offense by going outside of the family and bringing in somebody from the outside to do an audit and help make some changes to an offensive system that even with Trevor Lawrence was never as high powered as it could have been. They were good. They were efficient, but this was like, they weren't as good as they could have been. You remove that one piece from that offense, and yeah, ETN and all that, I get that, but just because DJ Uiagalelei was bad doesn't mean the defense should have been, or the offense should have been as bad as it was. But that's what Dabo Swinney is. Dabo Swinney is the college football mega church pastor. He believes just so much in what he does in his system. And if you look at his background, guy who came from nothing, guy who was him and his mom living together in an apartment. They were dirt poor, and he rose to the ranks of college football to become one of the best coaches in the sport. So he has the utmost belief in what he does. So he will keep it in the Clemson family, but that offense needed some new ideas. And I think that worries me as much about DJ's development as anything else. The fact that Clemson probably needed something new to help kind of kickstart that offense, and they just promoted from within, which I find to be kind of questionable.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up and made that point, Dan, because if Phil didn't hop in there before me, that's the exact question I was going to pose to you guys. If you were Dabo Swinney and you had this chance where, you didn't have to fire Tony Elliott, Tony Elliott went and took another job, would you have used that as an opportunity to kind of hit the reset button and refresh and kind of take a second to reevaluate what you're doing offensively, because clearly it didn't work last year. Clearly the players didn't live up to their potential. That's partially on the players, but is it part of a system that maybe always was operating at a higher level than it should be because of the players you had in there? Whether that was Deshaun Watson, obviously with Kelly Bryant, you kind of saw them with an average quarterback. They made it to a college football playoff, but were absolutely dominated by Alabama. That you get another generational talent at their quarterback, whichever Lawrence, and you have some amazing receivers, with Justin Ross, T. Higgins, and it kind of takes off again. And it's like, oh, okay, cool, it's back. And then you don't have that generational talent anymore. It takes another step back. You would have thought that this could have been like a opportunity to go ahead and just kind of hit the refresh button, adapt or die, because I know Dabo believes in what he does, and that actually might end up being the downfall, because if you look at the Nick Saban I'm not saying Dabo's ever going to be Nick Saban. He's not, but that's because Nick Saban at one point, when he realized that as good of a defensive-minded head coach as he was, as good as his defenses were, he needed to kind of flip the script and get some updated offense. He couldn't just go run out with Greg McElroy and Mark Ingram and Trent Richardson and Derrick Henry anymore. He had to actually go get the 5-star quarterback and go get a Lane Kiffin or a Steve Sarkisian, like a mind that could run an offense that's up to date. And it just seems like Dabo's kind of refusing to do that. And unfortunately, I think you're kind of right, Dan. This is a crossroads year, and I think the just refusal to take that initiative, and he just looks the other direction, I think might end up costing him, even if it might not be this year, because that defense is good enough to get them far.
It's kind of the old adage, like, the George W. Bush, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, don't fool me again. So it's like this type of thing where, yeah, not watch this drive. Where he can chalk up last year to, kind of a hiccup or a 1 year anomaly. And so it is kind of a thing where if it happens again this year, it probably would cause him to have to look in the mirror and say, we have to do something differently. Will he do that? As Dan says, I don't think so. I think he's going to just keep doing what he's doing. And can you really blame him though? Like, it's worked. I mean, he's risen the ranks, and they've been, the top team in college football outside of Alabama the past 10 years. So it's something where you can't really fault him for, but it could be, I'm not going to say downfall, because again, like last year's downfall was like 10-2. So it's not something where when things are bad at Clemson right now, they're winning 10 games. So it is a crossroads year, but crossroads for Clemson would be, top tier elite for, 90% of the teams in college football.
Yeah, a crossroads year for Clemson is the best year in a long time for any team, any other team in this conference. So where do you guys want to go with this? You guys want to get the storylines? What do you want to do?
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Phil, I think this is actually a pretty good segue to your storyline, because we're sitting here talking about Clemson's offense, and they have not quite a quarterback controversy yet, but a slow start here for DJ could mean like a Kelly Bryant, Trevor Lawrence type situation 3 or 4 weeks into the year. Why don't you kick us off with your storyline, which is quarterback play in the ACC?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at it top to bottom, there's a lot of talented quarterbacks in the ACC, which I think could pose a risk to Clemson, because, any one of the top like 7 or 8 guys have had games in their career where they just get into that zone and hit that elite tier. And if Clemson's offense isn't great, a lot of these games could be tight, could be low scoring, because people aren't putting up big numbers on Clemson, but it could come down to a couple plays here and there. And so when I look at the quarterbacks from top to bottom, it's honestly an exciting group, all the way down with Georgia Tech with Jeff Sims. He's a talented guy. Has he put it all together? No. Is he going to put it all together? No. But it's like you look at the bottom tier quarterbacks, and there's still a lot of talent. And then you kind of make your way through. And for me, it's, a couple names which are just kind of fun guys to watch, and guys who are just kind of gamers and scrappers. Even with like one of the top quarterbacks in Sam Hartman, we're going to see what happens with him. That was truly crushing. And you hope whatever he's going through, hope whatever's going on, gets kind of cleared up. And I was hoping, when I was looking at their schedule, I was hoping that Wake played Clemson towards the end of the year. I was thinking like a Sam Hartman returns to glory, takes down Clemson type game, but I think they have them in the 4th week.
It's like week 3 or 4. It's like right away.
Yeah. And I mean, that could be a cool storyline of Wake kind of resurging late in the year if he does come back. But again, I think they've been pretty quiet about that situation, so it's obviously something relatively sensitive. But just some of the quarterbacks that I'm excited about, honestly, are you have. Who I'm actually not excited about, Kedan Slovis. I don't think he's very good. He's coming in and people are just saying, hey, he's going to be great because he's, going to be the heir apparent to Kenny Pickett.
Kenny Pickett did it, so he's going to.
He's slow. He's declined each of the last 3 years. Now I know that was at USC with Clay Helton at the helm, but it's a complete new change of scenery. I'm not really bought into him. I thought he had a great freshman year, and since then has been an average to below average quarterback. But then you have, Phil Drakovic out of BC, the former Notre Dame guy. He was great 2 seasons ago. He really was. The game versus Clemson, he played his absolute ass off. He is extremely fun to watch. He's really tough. Last year, broke his hand in like the first game of the year and wasn't the same coming back. Has a tough offensive line. But again, I think he's someone who finds a way to win in big games and finds a way to just put up stats. You got a guy, Jordan Travis. I'm actually pretty high on Jordan Travis. I like him. I've seen what he's done. If he has kind of all the athletic abilities, both throwing and running, to be a really good player. Do you buy into Norvell? I don't know. But these are the conversations that I can almost, as you can hear myself, trying to talk myself into nearly every single one of those quarterbacks. And that's what I like. And then when you have some of the top quarterbacks, you have, Malik Cunningham, who's been there. He's been up and down, but people always talk about him like, look out for Malik Cunningham, Brennan Armstrong, Tyler Van Dyke out of Miami. People are absolutely gushing over him right now. I'm not going to get into NC State because I know, Dan, that's going to be your part, but NC State returns a damn good quarterback as well. And then even just the drama at Clemson. So just with that, like, those are all quarterbacks who are relatively household names. For any fans of college football, you kind of go up and down that list, outside of like Syracuse and like Duke, and you go up and down that list and like each one of these guys could be a guy. And for me, that should make things exciting, especially with the matchups against Clemson, because it's going to be Clemson's defense versus Brennan Armstrong. It's going to be Clemson's defense versus Phil Drakovic. And so those are the big storylines that I'm going to look forward to going into those games, not necessarily their entire offense, but hey, can these quarterbacks put the team on their back for the biggest game of the year?
I think those are good questions. Yeah, the Louisville one I'm interested in because Cunningham is an elite talent playmaker, and they probably should have fired their coach. So, I mean, that's going to be an interesting one.
But their coach is the former Appalachian State.
Yeah,
I always forget his name. Satterfield. That's it.
Yeah.
I knew it was something long, and he kind of didn't want to be there, but like had to keep the job.
It's just one of those really kind of dysfunctional situations that they probably should have punted on, and they could be good because of Malik Cunningham. To the point like Phil was making is like if he's plays to a high end, Louisville could be good. If not, there's going to be some problems, and they're probably going to be looking for a new coach, which they probably. I mean, he's been looking for the exit door for a while there, and maybe he'll find it eventually this year. But I mean, I guess that does segue into mine because I did want to talk about NC State with just the statement of fact that putting expectation on NC State football has never gone well historically in the sport of college football. Trivia question for the two of you off the top of your head. Can you guess how many 10-win seasons NC State football has in their entire history of playing organized collegiate football?
I'm gonna guess 3.
I'm gonna guess the one last year where they claimed the 10th win themselves in the bowl game.
That one technically does not count as one. However, Matt is correct in saying that the answer is 1. 2002, Chuck Amato, they went 11-3. They won the 2003 Gator Bowl, and do you guys know who
I
they beat
remember that.
in the Gator Bowl?
I remember. That's one of the first college football games I remember.
Is that Phillip Rivers?
That would have been Phillip Rivers last year, right? Because he would have been drafted in 03, right? The Roethlisberger Rivers. Yeah. So
I thought there was a year in like 2006, maybe 2006. Maybe their peak of NC State has been 8 or 9 wins, but I just assumed I made an ass out of myself, as the old saying goes.
There was also a fun time there where it's not the case anymore because Phillip Rivers is retired, and I sincerely hope Mike Glenn isn't still on a football team. But counting Russell Wilson, it was, I think, NC State and Michigan State had the most professional had the most quarterbacks with them as their alma mater in the NFL at 3 apiece, which is just, you think of all the awesome schools like the Ohio States, the Alabamas, and NC State had 3 in there, and Michigan State had 3 in there. That's just a wild stat that I like. But back to NC State.
So that's my thing is like a lot of people are high on NC State, and I get it. Like they were surprisingly good last year, a defense that was in the top 20 in EPA per play defense. They have 10 starters back on a defense that was very good last year. They've got a lot coming back on offense. They've got a good news, bad news situation with the offensive line. The good news is they have 4 offensive linemen back. The bad news is the one they're losing was a top 10 pick in the draft, Nicky Ekwonu. And then you have Devin Leary, who Eli Drinkwitz, the coach at Missouri, said has Josh Allen-like arm talent. And I hope he's right, because I have 125-1 reasons why I hope Devin Leary has a great season this year. But that's the fascinating thing. It's like this is a program that has always found ways to trip over themselves. They've been the we've talked about the landmine in the past. Like they've been the team that has tripped people up in the past. But this is a program that has never gotten over that hump. And part of me kind of wishes we could just move them to whatever division Clemson is not in. Is that the Coastal? Been
Correct.
Watched 14 hours of college football every Saturday for 15 weeks every year and still have no idea who's in which division is which in the ACC. Wish we could move NC State into the Coastal and just let them, Pittsburgh and Miami, brawl to find out who gets to play Clemson in the ACC championship game. Because I know, like, Clemson plays Miami. Do they play Miami and Pittsburgh this year? I don't know. Whatever. Like, I know all these.
I don't believe they have Pittsburgh this year. I think they're away from Pittsburgh.
I think they do play Miami, because I know Miami plays them in Texas.
End of the year, towards the end of the year.
Like, just want to see what's going to happen with that, because it's a program that the expectations are just sky high, and I get why people might believe in that. Like, the talent level comparatively to the rest of the league is probably middle of the pack when you look at recruiting, but they've developed well. And Dave Doran, I mean, this is kind of the year for them. If they don't win 10 games this year, they may never win 10 games again. Who knows? But like, it's fascinating.
I have a shocking statistic for you all that I want you to guess on. So I was listening to something the other day that was just talking about just the atmosphere at NC State. How many people on average do you think attend an NC State home game?
Can you tell me how big their stadium is? Is that cheating?
I think it's like 59,000 around.
Let's say,
I don't know,
31,000.
I was going to say around 27.
57,000.
Oh,
wow.
They rank number 2.
For them.
They rank in a 5-year rolling average. They rank number 2 behind Clemson for like highest stadium capacity during games. And so for me, that's something where it's like, I don't know what to make of that, but I just think it would be really cool if NC State could be good, because it's clear their fan base, I don't know who they are, but are huge fans of the Wolfpack. So that's just something. It also, if NC State is good, it's something where if they're good, it truly can be a home field advantage type situation. So that's also something you have to factor, where the fans are bought in despite them not having a 10-win season since Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what they have. I mean, Clemson, North Carolina, Louisville on the road. I mean, Clemson's the daunting one. Everything else, Wake Forest obviously is going to take a huge step back. There's just like the ACC schedule is not tricky. Like it's going to come down to a back-to-back week period where they play at Clemson and then they play Florida State. The two, maybe toughest games on their schedule, depending on how good Wake Forest ends up being without Sam Hartman. So it's doable for them this year. And that's kind of why I like my philosophy when it comes to Heisman Trophy candidates is, well, 1, do they play for Alabama? 2, if not, does their team have a chance to play for the national championship or make the playoff? Or do they have is it a quarterback on a team that hasn't been very good in a very long time and could maybe win 10 games? Like, you look at Kenny Pickett being a finalist last year, and to Phil's point earlier, it's like, I mean, if Boston College were to ever win 10 games, like Phil Drakovic could be that guy, Malik Cunningham could be that guy. I don't think their teams are nearly going to be good enough, don't get me wrong. I think Devin Leary is the one guy on a team that is potentially good enough. And also Van Dyke. I mean, Miami is a little bit different, but they still have never won the ACC, let's not forget. They've only been to one conference championship game since moving to the ACC and got crushed by Clemson. So maybe a Van Dyke. I mean, those are probably the two guys, and I hated Van Dyke's odds the entire process. But, I mean, it would be fun to see that team finally reach their peak and get a spot in the Orange Bowl, which is not a semifinal game this year, because we did this discussion the other day. I think it's Peach.
Yeah, we did. I forgot which one. It's Peach and Cotton or
Peach
Fiesta?
And Fiesta. It's Cotton and Orange, Peach and Fiesta, Rose and Sugar are how the rotation goes.
Gotcha.
Matt, what is your most interesting storyline?
I had one, but then it kind of just became my best bet, so I'm going to veer a little bit here. We've talked about just about everybody in the ACC so far, outside of Georgia Tech, which we'll get to, but they're bad enough where you don't have to really worry about them. There's a team that I think we've talked about college football being a better place when this team is good, whether that's Texas, whether that's Nebraska. I know they're not the most historic of programs, but man, when Virginia Tech is good, college football is just a better place because they have kind of unique colors, they have unique uniforms, they have the home field advantage. They have the really cool entrance. They have how many times a year do we see them getting to host a Thursday or Saturday night primetime game, and everybody tries to hype you up that Enter Sandman's there and win, and then go out and lose, whether it's 40 to Clemson or a average Notre Dame team comes in and beats them with a freshman quarterback. Like, when is that program going to get? Are they flirting with too close to irrelevancy? Because we're going to talk about Florida State, and they're kind of teetering there too. Miami made a big move to go out there and get their big time head coach to try and like fight that off. But Virginia Tech's a program that has gone so far downhill, so far fast that it's just a team that I'm very intrigued to keep watching. I know they hired the head coach. Their new head coach is the defensive coordinator from Penn State. Not sure how their recruiting's gone this year, but we haven't heard too much about it, so it can't be going that great. Like, how close are they to irrelevancy? Because it seems like they're kind of trending that way and have been for a little while, and it just doesn't seem like they can snap out of the tailspin that they're in.
Matt, I really thought you were going to say Duke there.
Yeah.
We hadn't brought up Duke, though they do bring Mike Elko as their new head coach, so that's a fun fact.
Another defensive-minded coach. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a team that I'm just going to want to bet unders on all year because Justin Fuente couldn't get them going on offense most of the time. They've been like, when was the last time the Virginia Tech was like really good on offense?
Michael Vick.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more recently.
They had some guys afterwards, but they kind of exist now. Brent Pry is going to bring a hard-nosed, defensive-minded system to a place where they'll kind of appreciate that after years of Bud Foster running that defense. But yeah, can he invigorate that program, which even though Blacksburg itself is kind of in the middle of nowhere, it is still not far removed from a very fertile recruiting ground. And if you can really make that hay in that area the way that they did in the Beamer days, then yeah, I mean, they should be able to rebuild things, but it's a long-term project. I don't necessarily want to say it's a year zero because I don't think they're building from scratch, but it seems to me like there's going to be some growing pains with it this year, and then it's just going to kind of be a wait and see situation.
And yeah. I'm still stuck in the mindset of like, oh, do they still play like Beamer ball? It's like I'm expecting them to block like a punt every other game, and that's also just like not the case. So it's a type of thing where, Matt, I agree with you. It's just they're a type of team where when they're good at football, it is a big game environment. Granted, they haven't won those big games lately, but a big, meaningful game at Virginia Tech at night, whether you're there or whether you're watching from the couch, it's just, it feels right. It feels like good college football, and I think we deserve to have that back.
Yeah, it just feels like ever since Beamer left, I mean, Justin Fuente was there for way too long, and like they just never formed an identity. They had an identity with Frank Beamer, and like, would that play in today's college football world? No, probably not. But like, you knew what they were back then. I'm not saying go back to being that, but man, like, be somebody. Don't try to be everybody. Don't like, I don't know. They don't have any identity. We don't know what they are other than, man, that team used to be a lot of fun, and it's really cool when they have a home night game, but oh wait, they're down 14-3 in the first quarter and this one's over. Like it's something that I hope to see us go back.
They do have some great
home what?
Great home field shirts, Dan.
They do.
Maybe I'll look into that. Maybe
treadmill one's very good.
Maybe that's the first start here, reversing the curses. I have to buy a Virginia Tech home field shirt.
Yeah, I don't know about all that.
That's probably right.
So moving on, we want to do some best bets. I guess I can just go first because mine I have dubbed Dan's. My mouse won't work. Dan's very sad but easy money bet. Georgia Tech under 3.5 regular season wins -125. So I have a soft spot for this program. Growing up in Atlanta, growing up wanting to see them be good. After college, living back in Atlanta, my cousin works at Georgia Tech. We would go to a bunch of games in the Paul Johnson era. This team is just so bad, and everything is just so toxic. I think they ended up not firing Collins because of the buyout, and they wanted to knock another year off of it. But the entire team left in the transfer portal. Nobody wants him to be the coach there. They play their do you know their non-conference? At least their FBS non-conference games. I mean,
obviously Georgia.
They play Georgia every year. They have Ole Miss. They have Ole Miss coming to Atlanta, and then they have to go to UCF.
Why?
An opposing coach said that this looks like a non-conference schedule that was designed to get Jeff Collins fired. He's going to get fired after this year. Like, they have 2 games on their schedule that are winnable. They play Western Carolina, who's a mediocre FCS team, and they play Duke, who is really bad, but like maybe they're in a spot even where Duke just kind of has some positivity around a new coaching staff and Georgia Tech doesn't, and that one's not even a gimme. Other than that, Virginia, who they are projected as a 5-point favorite against, or an underdog against, is the only team the rest of the schedule where they're not projected to be at least a 7-point underdog. So you're telling me like they have 2 winnable games, 1 game where they're a 5-point dog, and the rest of them they're at least a 7-point dog, and their win total is 3.5. I already bet this number. I bet it a couple of weeks ago. If it even got down to a 3, or like even if there was an alt 2.5, I would consider it depending on the price. Because I just don't. I mean, okay, maybe they win those 2 games and then they would just have to steal 1 more, like we talked about the Kansas bet, the one that I bet the over on. But it's a really bad situation right now. I'll stump right now. Like they're afraid, like they hate the option at Georgia Tech. The people just don't want to hear that term ever again. So like I don't know that they would ever go back to it. But I'm going to stump for it right now. Georgia Tech, go hire Jamie Chadwell from Coastal Carolina. Let him bring his offense there. Like, you have to innovate there. You can't out-recruit Georgia at Georgia Tech for a million reasons. So you're going to have to do something different. You're going to have to do something unique. And Jeff Collins is all steak and all sizzle and no steak. He's all hat and no cattle. I don't know any more weird folksy metaphors I can come up with for it. But that has come to its natural progression. Like if in the NFL they have first coach fired markets, like if there was one in college football, Jeff Collins would probably be like minus 1,000 at this point because it's just such a bad situation and kind of a bummer.
I mean, you talked about it there. Like you mentioned, they have Duke on the schedule, and Duke might not be much better, but they also have momentum. Not momentum, but like they have a new, fresh feeling with a new head coach. Then you mentioned Kansas, you know, the 2.5, and they're going to be bad too. But like they're feeling good about last year because this is their second year with a head coach that by all means is getting pretty rave reviews or as good reviews as can with how bad they were last year. Those are the types of programs that steal a game that they shouldn't. You rarely ever see, almost never, a team like Georgia Tech where the head coach is a lame duck, where you know he's back, not back, where the team's given up on him, that steals a win against a team they shouldn't. So that's why you said alt under 2.5. That's exactly what popped into my head. I need to go find them at 3 or 2.5 and just absolutely pound that line.
And I'm going to stall here for a second and see if I can find the number. But do you know who they opened their season with?
Not Georgia.
No, they opened their season with Clemson at home in week 1.
Oh,
that number has been steamed. That number has been steamed up 3 points. It opened at 18.5. It's 21.5 right now, and I would still take Clemson. I'd probably take Clemson out. I swear to God, I'd probably take Clemson out to 28.
I might buy the hook, but I would absolutely take that at 21. I hate the hook.
Lay them and laugh.
I've been so badly burned by the hook stand that it's habit now to buy the hook.
Clemson's going to beat them by 40. I don't know that I would advocate betting it at more than where it is right now but they're going to beat them by at least 40.
Clemson's defense might outscore Georgia.
Yeah, Clemson's defense will probably score it's going to be like they're going to have like 16 field goals if the Clemson's offense just miserable.
All right, I'm told we need to keep these moving, so I guess we'll go Matt next because yours is a win total and Phil's doing a division bet. So, Matt, what are we going with?
Yeah, Phil touched on Florida State earlier and liking Jordan Travis. I don't truly understand that all that often. I think Florida State's a little bit in a place where they're kind of not quite with a lame duck head coach, but probably having a head coach that I don't think is going to be there very much longer. What's the name of the top cornerback that he had, but then flipped to Deion's team, Jackson State? You guys remember?
It was the cornerback. I don't remember.
But yeah, the top. He had the top overall recruit, and then people were loving him and saying Florida State's back. He leaves, loses all recruiting momentum. Florida State just can't seem to get themselves back. A little bit better than Virginia Tech probably, but still seem to be in quite a tailspin. Like their offensive line was really bad last year, and they're banking on being able to run the ball really well because that's what Mike Norvell does. That's what he did at Memphis. What he's trying to do here. But their offensive line isn't – they brought in some transfers, but like relying on those types of guys to kind of anchor what was a bad offensive line and gel right away in a new program, not always the smartest bet. Their defense was absolutely awful last year, and they lost was Jermaine Johnson of the draft, their best player. The secondary last year was questionable, even though they had what was a pretty good pass rush. That was about all they had going for it. Secondary was still terrible. I don't buy them as a program. I don't really buy into Jordan Travis. I'm pulling up their schedule here. Like they have Duquesne week 1 that, yeah, they'll beat. Though I will say Florida State has lost some really, really questionable week 1, week 2 games against low FBS, high FCS teams, but they'll win that game. But Then they go to LSU. They go to Louisville. Like LSU, we talked about, I'm not super high on this year, but that's Brian Kelly at home in a big game against a team that he's more talented than. He's probably going to win that game for LSU. Then you go to Louisville, like we talked, what are they? But we don't really know, but we know they have a really talented quarterback. They get Boston College at home, really talented quarterback. Wake Forest, you don't know, obviously, if Sam Hartman's going to be there or not. But after that Wake game, they go to NC State, to Clemson. Like, the schedule doesn't really line up for them. Their non-conference is Duquesne, obviously, but then LSU, they have Louisiana, who I know lost their head coach, but they're usually a pretty decent program. And then Florida, who I don't think they're going to beat. Like, that's hard for me to find 7 wins on that schedule.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to give me plus 25 at 125. I like the under 6.5.
I would just say I think Louisiana is going to take a pretty big step back this year with a new coach. But yeah, I mean, all of your points otherwise I think are very valid.
I don't get the. I don't see 7 wins on that schedule because I don't think they're all that talented. I think the thing to try to do that Mike Norvell wants to do, their roster isn't built to do. So if you want to run the football, you got to play some good defense, and I don't think they're built to do that either.
And my only thought on that is I would have liked to see more steps last year from Norvell. You gave him, first year pass, second year you want to see a bump. You just haven't
get it. It was the same thing.
The same thing. I mean, I saw like a little bit of improvement in terms of like, it seems like the player's mentality and want to as part of the play, but it wasn't on the inspired meter. It wasn't hitting all the right marks there. So I'm with you. I like that bet a lot.
Need them to get back because that's another team that's just better. It's college football is better when Florida State's really good, and they're nowhere close to it right now.
Well, keeping with that theme about when college football is better when certain teams are good, Phil, what do you like in the ACC? What is your bet?
So if this was 2023, I would absolutely love NC State to make it to the championship game, but sadly it's not. So in 2023, they're doing away with division, so it's just going to be the top 2 teams. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So in 2022, I like Miami to win the Coastal, and so I'm not super high on Miami, but I think they can be a 9-win team, 10-win team, and pretty easily make it to the championship game. And the reason is it's going to come down to the last game of the season against Pitt, and so I asked myself this: do I trust Narduzzi and Kedan Slovis, or do I trust a team that's hopefully going to grow throughout the year with Mario Cristobal and
neither?
Exactly. But who do I think is going to? Who do I trust less? It's Narduzzi and Kedan Slovis, where I think you have Van Dyke on the other side, Cristobal, and it's hopefully going to be pretty reinvigorated. And the thing is, if Miami starts playing well, if Miami starts putting things together, the talent, the want to, the enthusiasm around that program is very palpable. And so at the end of the season, if they're riding a slight high, I take them very much over Miami versus a Pitt team where if this was the middle of the season, you always get that kind of middle of the season big Pitt upset game, them wearing their incredible jerseys, which I think are the top jerseys. And those blue and yellows, I think those are some of the best uniforms in college football. But again, I just can never get excited about Pat Narduzzi. He's just going to go there and complain on the podium and kind of do woe is me. But I like Miami to win this game late in the year and ultimately make it to the championship game. And that's kind of where I stand. I'm not super high Miami, but I think, anyone can win the Coastal, and I think Miami will beat Narduzzi and Kedan Slovis.
Yeah, I don't trust. I did have my first original bet was going to be taking a flyer on Brennan Armstrong in Virginia to win the Coastal at plus 550. It was mainly because kind of what you said. Who in the Coastal outside of Miami really scares you? Like I don't buy into Pitt this year. I think a lot of what Pitt did well last year, obviously they played well defensively. Mark Whipple was a great offensive coordinator for him. Kenny Pickett was really good, and Whipple's gone, and I don't see them recreating that magic with a quarterback who's not quite as good and a head coach who maybe he was just saying it because he didn't want people to dwell on the past of the offensive coordinator who left them, but pretty much said like, yeah, I don't like how much we passed last year. We need to go back to our roots. We need to go run the ball. Like, way to just be a wet blanket over a program.
So it's not a good quote. I will defend Narduzzi in that the quote got blown a little bit out of proportion. He was saying he didn't want them to throw the ball as much because Kenny Pickett got hit so much last year, and he wanted him to get hit less, which I think is a fair concern. To pick the Wake Forest game of all games when you threw the ball for 1,000,000 yards and won is a weird choice. On that note, The team that I think you bet in this division is Pittsburgh just because of the prices right now. And I think you wait and you hope Pittsburgh loses to Tennessee and Miami hangs close at Texas A&M, and you get a price that is even longer on that. Because right now, okay, so if you say, like, hypothetically, if it comes down to Miami at Pittsburgh, right now Pittsburgh is, I had it up here a second ago, Pittsburgh is plus 300 to win the Coastal. When they play head-to-head in Miami in the last game of the season, do you think that Pittsburgh is going to be longer or shorter than plus 300 to win that game? I'm guessing they're probably going to be a little bit shorter. Yeah. Now, if they start slow, because obviously the West Virginia game and the Tennessee game don't matter in terms of the conference, like, they don't play well in those games, the price is just going to continue to grow. So I wouldn't bet it now. But, I mean, I think it's a complete and total toss-up. If I had to make a pick, again, we talked about this, like, if I had to make a pick, I'm picking Miami. But if I had to make a bet on it, I think Pittsburgh, to me, is the best bet, just because I want longer odds, because this ties, and this is how you tie a bow on the entire discussion. I don't know how you trust anybody in this conference. So if I'm going to have to make a season-long bet on something, I'm going to take longer odds on something that I feel is potentially as likely as something that has much shorter odds. I hope that logically makes sense.
That was a pretty perfect way. You weren't kidding. That was a perfect way to tie a bow on this. Pretty much exactly where we started.
All right. Do we have anything else that we would like to add before we wrap our final preview show, before we get into the week 0 schedule?
Yeah, I think we mentioned this, but Friday morning on Brown Bag, Dan and I will have some best bets for you for week 0. But then, later this morning. Sorry, later this morning. Definitely not recording this 2 days earlier.
Not recording this on Wednesday.
No, definitely not Wednesday for sure. But then on Tuesday we'll be coming at you. I believe I said this, but can't hurt to promote us. Tuesday we'll have a little bit of a week 0 recap, but some early looks at some week 1 lines, and then Thursday we'll be doing our full week 1 preview. Let's get you ready. Let's get you set up for actual, real, live, good college football, and I cannot wait. It's here. We made it.
I'll unload the clip on other things I've bet for college football on Friday later this morning. So tune into that right here.
I would like on Tuesday if we could just, Dan, the amount of Heisman bets and bets. I want to see what your full card is on Tuesday. It might be about an entire notebook's worth, but I want to see Dan's full card on Tuesday. I want to get it. I want to get it all out there.
Without saying the names, I'm going to do it in my head real quick before we sign off. I have 1, 2, 3, 5. I have 5 Heisman winner bets, and then the one that I will get because I gave it out was the Stetson Bennett. So 6
That's not awful.
Heisman related, which I don't think is in a field of 1 million players. I don't think having 5 Heisman bets. No. I will say none of them are shorter than 40 to 1, and I won't I'll tell you what prices I bet it at. You're not going to get any of these guys at any of these prices because I bet into this market so early, other than Travion Henderson the other day.
You were legit writing Heisman winner, Heisman blogs in March and April. Pretty much as soon as those markets came out, you had Heisman blogs out. It pays to look into it early.
Alabama and Ohio State are going to win the play for the national championship. No shit. All right, well, that'll do it, I guess, for this one. Like we said, we'll be back next week to finally talk some week 1. But it was good stuff, and if you guys have nothing else that you want to get out before I wrap, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the music.
Hit it.